Hi everyone, this is Rochelle Rizzi with Vrai, and today I'm with Steve Baker. He's the Vice President of the Great Game of Business, which is the educational division of SRC Holdings. I'm really excited to bring him to the table today. I can't tell you enough about how much this means to me, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But Steve, welcome, and thank you so much for joining. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about, I'd love to hear the history of SRC and share that with our entrepreneurial network.
Absolutely. Well, Rochelle, first, thank you for having us on the show. I mean, this is a real honor for me. I know that when I talked to Jack about this, he's still our working CEO after all these years. And it's a real honor for me to kind of take the place, if you will, just to tell the story and talk a little bit about why people really matter in business and what business can do to change the world. My name is Steve Baker. I help run the what we call the kind of the training and education and consulting arm of SRC Holdings. Before I get into what we do there, I think going back in the past would be very helpful. I know that many of the folks in your network have probably read Jack Stack's original book, The Great Game of Business. That's the story of how Jack Stack and 12 other managers bought a dying division of International Harvester way back in 1983. And in fact, it's kind of a great story you ought to experience for yourself. So we highly recommend you read it or listen to it. In fact, I drug Jack Stack into the recording studio 20 years after he wrote that book to record it in his own voice, because you got to hear Jack's, kind of tough Chicago, accent, that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, it's great.
But he was a young guy working for International Harvester in Chicago at Melrose Park, which just recently closed, as a matter of fact, after all these years. But he was sent to Springfield, Missouri to help to close down a division of International that was responsible for remanufacturing all the broken down, dirty diesel engines that failed in the fields. So in an International Harvester engine would break, it would go to Springfield, to the Springfield Renew Center, SRC. And down there were about 119 people who basically took those things apart, the most mechanically complex object on the planet, completely broken down, and they didn't rebuild them, they remanufactured them, which is a whole different thing. It's like not rebuild, it's reborn. And so every part is looked at, machined, it's brought back to better than new spec, reassembled, painted, and it's just a beautiful thing. These people were the best in the world at what they did. And yet they faced losing their job. Because what I didn't tell you is back in the late 70s and early 80s, International was losing $57,000 an hour. They weren't responding to global competition. They were bleeding cash. And when you're bleeding cash, you got to cut jobs. And that's the big problem with not paying attention to the marketplace, right? They figured they could do business the same way they had done for 100 years previous. Command and control, do your job, nothing more, nothing less. We'll take care of the numbers. We don't need your big ideas. And so people were losing their jobs. Thousands of people, 1,000 people a week for 2 years straight. Massive layoffs. They invented the Rust Belt. Well, Jack was sent down. At the time, he was 29 years old, sent to Springfield to close a factory. And he's like, first of all, I don't want that on my resume, right? Closing a factory at this age just sounds terrible. Plus, he had this, I always like to think of Jack as being like, he's Irish Catholic, so he's like, 80% guilt and 20% alcohol or something. I don't know what it is. Some sort of a measure in there. But he is really smart, and he is super competitive. And he looked at his people and he says, wait a minute, there's 119 people that are best in the world. Why should they lose their jobs? And so he went to International, said, what if we could buy the place? They said, we want $9 million. He went to his people, said, let's scrape together whatever we can. Go to your neighbors, your friends, your in-laws. They scraped together $100,000, and Jack went on this incredible odyssey to get financing to save these jobs. The funny thing is banks had a completely different set of metrics than he did. He would come in with his, wonderful certificates of best warranty rate in the industry, best quality rate, on-time delivery, right? All the things you can think of to say, look at how awesome we are. Banks said, when are you going to pay the money back? Well, he didn't have that answer, right? So every time they said, where's your business plan? He'd go, Okay, so he'd go figure out what a business plan was. Where's your cash flow statement? Huh? Everything that they asked for, he had to learn by trial and error. 54 banks turned him down. 54, if you can imagine that. And so that's really the story, because Jack's big thing about business has always been there is a gap between the haves and the have-nots. And the secret is understanding how money works. The financials have been around. What he discovered was they've been around since 1494, when Luca Pacioli, the father of modern accounting, created the income statement and balance sheet as we know them today. And they haven't changed in 500 years. He says, why doesn't everybody understand this? Well, as Dave Ramsey, the personal finance guru, says, money flows from people who do not understand it to people who do. And Jack said, we've got to be the people who do. Now, of course, this was before Dave Ramsey, right? It's just Dave Ramsey for business, if you will, and has been around for a long time. Flash forward to the big closing. He finally found out that if you have a bad loan, like 89-1 debt to equity, you got to find a bad bank. So that's what he did. He started to understand business more. After 54 rejections, he learned their language by trial and error. So he said, I hear you're booking bad loans. I got a doozy for you. And they booked the worst corporate buyout in American history, that 89-1. And all he was trying to do is save 119 jobs. Along the path, he discovered that there is a secret language in business, and he was going to teach every person. In fact, that was his deal with God. He said, help me save these jobs, get this loan, keep the business going, and I will teach everyone business. And that is what the Great Game of Business is about. It's a book, of course, way back from 1992. When interest really started to kick off back then in this open book management, which is kind of the generic word for a great game of business, people started showing up in Springfield and interrupting business operations. Because Jack, Rochelle, he's so generous. He's like, yeah, come on out. I'll take you to lunch. I'll take you bass fishing, whatever you want, And people would learn about it, but it was interrupting operations. So finally, his people came to him and said, Jack, we got to do something. He goes, okay, well, you know what? Let's make a business of it. And so he said, that'll take care of it, put people in tours and workshops and things like that. And as soon as he did, more people showed up, so it's become something that's really special. We're one division now of 10 different companies that make up SRC Holdings today, but we've spun off 66 companies since 1983, and we've gone from 119 people to about 2,000, and we happen to be 100% employee owned now as well. So if that wasn't too much, that's kind of our genesis, is how do you get people to think and act like owners do? Well, you got to teach them business.
Right. No, that's a great synopsis. And I was able to witness SRC firsthand on a tour and a couple of days of training through the Great Game of Business. It was really life-changing and inspiring. At the time, I couldn't tell you what year it was that I was there, but at the time I was going through a pretty big growth stage. I had recently severed a relationship with my business partner. And that was a really tough, it was a really tough severance. It was just, this was a friend of mine. We had grown the business together, but I don't know if it's that I outgrew her or she couldn't keep up with the business, or, it was just bigger than I think either of us ever imagined. And I'm the visionary, and I kept going. While I was sitting there, I remember feeling, boy, this is really fantastic. I have an MBA. I'm thinking, I'm highly educated and I don't understand what's going on.
Don't we all fool ourselves just a little bit? Like,
oh yeah,
not at all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Got the degree, check, and I think it's not until you have the practical application that you really start to connect the dots. I mean, you can't just read a book and know what you're doing. And finance and accounting happen to be one of my weak points. I am a creator, I'm a writer, I love to build things. I'm also a strategist, and having the numbers piece really filled in the gaps for me. Mm-hmm. I do remember though going to the SRC floor it was like a cafeteria. Mm-hmm. Environment, and the entire wall was this, I don't know how big that was, like 40 by 60 feet, right? A huge scoreboard of types, and it was the P&L. Everybody was shouting out the numbers, and these were people who were not highly educated. they had a lot of experience in the business on the floor and practical application for their job. So they could say what the number was, but more than that, what it meant and what was
Exactly.
next and how they got there and what they needed to do. And they were true entrepreneurs in their own little divisions, in their own little job. And I thought, how powerful is that? I was inspired, and I went back and I started to instill the great game of business and having an open book culture, which is not something that happens overnight. And I, in fact, had the entire team sit down and they all created their little mini games, and they all thought about why their jobs were important, and created a way to measure it and celebrate their success. Was a little way to get started, and then educating everybody on the P&L, I really do think helped the company to flourish and to grow. Yeah. What other stories do you have when you're speaking to people of like their aha moments?
Oh my gosh. Well, you're starting out right. I think it's interesting that you said one thing, that maybe these folks weren't highly educated. And I would like to just point out that highly educated includes formal and informal education, right? So the formal education is often, you're right. I mean, we do remanufacture engines and engine components. But I work in a business consulting firm, right? We're a boutique consulting firm by definition. I have an art degree and I teach business now. If I can learn it, anyone can. And I found this place totally by accident. But the stories that I've heard since I started almost 15 years ago range from, well, first of all, I must say, they are often very emotionally charged because of the fact that people were struggling, or they hit a wall, or they were in I think before this interview, we were talking about a story of a guy I talked to Monday who was struggling with the thing of, if I sell my company to a PE firm, they're going to squeeze it for everything. It operates beautifully right now, and they would continue to do that, but the soul would be drained out of it along with the cash, and then they would spin it off, or whatever. That sounds horrible, doesn't it? I just lumped all PE people. I'm sorry, all of you private equity people with a soul. You're good. I love you, and we need your equity. Here's the thing: the decision of him to go from, I could sell privately. He probably didn't want to do an IPO. It wasn't really the kind of business to do that. But the other option was employee ownership, and going through an ESOP. I'm not saying everyone should be employee owned, but I do tell you this: his people, he will always have credibility with his people because of the fact that he's taught them enough to run. They understand the P&L. They're just now learning the balance sheet, and this takes time, as you said, years. The amazing thing is people are starting to go, wow, why would he do that? Because if I'm doing the math right, that's millions left on the table for him. It's not about the money now, right? It's about the soul. It's about creating jobs and creating wealth and sharing the wealth with those who created it. We just need more of that, because the more people learn, it's amazing to me. I mean, my kids are 19, 25, 27, and I'm seeing it in them. They're so intelligent and so cool. And I'm glad Joanne and I made all the right decisions that were so hard back then. No, you can't have that, whatever. I mean, that sounds horrible, but we had a weekend with them. It was pretty amazing. But to see the difference in financial acumen at the different ages, and it wasn't because we taught them wrong or differently or anything else. It's because they're learning the lessons in life. As you pointed out, you got to go apply it. Mm-hmm. And until you run into a few walls, you probably aren't going to have those lessons stick real well. So, the stories every day, you could say blessed, you could say lucky. I don't know which I am, but I'm going to go with a little of both, because I work with really cool people. They're people who are seeking something better, which is my story. I was always into continuous improvement. I just didn't know to call it that. I'm always reading books. And back then it was Zig Ziglar and, Stephen Covey and all this sort of thing. And they were all saying there's something else, but no one ever said what it was. Mm-hmm. And I come to realize that if people can figure out how to become financially independent, think of all the lessons they learned along the way, and think of how they're influencing their children, their community. I mean, this is where true, real social change happens, is to really understand how we can make an impact. It isn't just the obvious stuff that we see on television. It is to change lives and to empower people with the ultimate secret language, and that's money. And it isn't money that the root of all evil. That isn't really how the phrase works. The idea is that money is simply a way. I heard a senator say once, money is a substitute for violence. In other words, instead of me coming over and clubbing you on the head, Rochelle, taking your stuff, I can say, hey, here's some paper, would you like to exchange, or, that sort of thing. Am I just going way off the rails here? Cause I get way
No,
too emotional about this
no,
subject.
it's good. And it actually, I don't want to interrupt you, but it brings some points up to me. Can I segue?
Please,
Okay.
please.
I was thinking about this, Change the Game, which I just finished. I had a moment in there where I teared up and I had to put it down.
Awesome.
Because it resonated so much with me. When I started my business, I believe I was 27 years old, and I ran a marketing agency for 12 years. Along the lines, I had gone through mergers, acquisitions. I ended up buying a whole nother company and making a sister company. I then had 2 commercial properties. I had a property management company, and then I created a mothership company, which was supposed to be my retirement plan. So essentially I was setting it up where all the overhead was up here, lawyers, accountants, anything that the companies could share were up in the Rizzi family of businesses, the RFA.
That's your holding company.
My holding company. And I tailored it to mirror a little bit of Ari from Zingerman's. He and I sat down and talked about, like, how did you do the Zcob, the Zingerman's community of businesses? I said, I want to do something like that because I see this energy and I'm propelled to, build more businesses. I love creating jobs. And, what I started to feel though was the word judgment keeps coming up for me. The more successful that you get, and successful, I'm going to put in air quotes.
Sure.
Because on paper, now I see there were some huge gaps that I was not identifying, and none of the advisors in my circle were identifying. I had all the wrong people on the bus. No, I'm not talking just about my team and my employees, because I had some really fantastic people that worked with me. And I like to say with me because we had a culture of, for example, we'd go to a pizza party and celebrate something with the team. And we would say, thank you, Charlie. And we had this whole Charlie's Angels thing, like, we'll take care of the business and the business will take care of us. So we had the right culture and we had the right vibe there. They didn't feel that it was necessarily just me giving to them, me celebrating them, that we were celebrating each other and trying to be a part of something. And I think that at one point we really had that magic. But the judgment can go both ways. You can be pulled to do something more because someone's expecting something of you, which is, I think, what I fell into. Or you can be held back because you're afraid of what other people will think. And that judgment piece really was, I think, something. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as I grew the business, the banks were like, here's more money. Yes, more money. The community was saying, oh, here's an award. And I do feel that the team earned it. And I will say, I think I earned those awards. However, at some point I should have done a gut check and just said, because in the meantime, I'm raising 4 children. I have 4 businesses. My husband at the time, and he is now my former husband, at the time seemed supportive, but didn't fully understand what was going on the business side. I had to hire a full-time nanny just to make sure everything was going. So from a working mom CEO standpoint, I was on complete overwhelm and could not figure out. I didn't identify that. I was on also, I think, pure adrenaline. And I think there was a little pride, as a young woman who I was proud of what I was building, but I had lost track of where I wanted to go. I was so just trying to keep up with the day to day, that I could not successfully get up here to have the right people. And I had some gut instincts of getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people out. And I didn't follow through. And in the end, I ended up selling the event venue, which was the sister company, to try to ease my workload. It was a profitable sale. I had to pay capital gains. So you always know you made some money when you have to pay taxes.
Exactly.
And it did ease my workload. I just had my fourth baby, and it was a smart decision. Now, at the same time, 6 months later, I had an employee who had started to clearly not feel a part of the company. And here's the thing, and I told you this before we got on the interview, and I'm very careful to share this story because I am still a great believer in open book. But if you don't have the right systems and the right people, it can haunt you and it can hurt you, because first of all, you got to know your numbers. And if you don't know your numbers and you're only holding your team accountable, then they can create stories and fill in the blanks for you.
They will.
And I know I'm saying that ambiguously because my goal is not to defame anybody in the company and part of the journey. But in the end, this person and 3 other people in the company went behind my back and started something else. And in doing that, it took the company from being successful and ready to go to the next level to, holy hell, how are we going to fix this?
Right.
And I was able to hang on to some of the greatest people and muddle through. And in the meantime, my marriage is suffering. I'm exhausted. And it was just this never-ending internal battle. And I'm sharing all of this because, like I said, Jack Stack was a mentor to me. He was in the numbers with me. He was right beside me through all of this. And there is a story early on in this book that talks about this couple that had this great idea, this interior design company. And they were just looking for investors and what they didn't realize was trying to plug a hole and didn't have the right structure in place. That's what I didn't know, what I didn't know. So yes, I'd been to SRC. Yes, I was inspired. Yes, I'm the kind of person that'll come back and just do it and jump right in. But I couldn't identify that I didn't have the right people in the right seats. Maybe they were the right people in the wrong seats. Now I've got all this experience and I can say, I know a little bit more. But it was a really vulnerable time. And I want to share with my audience that in the end, I didn't have the right people around me. I went through a divorce. I am a single mom. I am now out on my own. I went to work for a client for 4 years just to try to appreciate the pause and get myself back. And I called Jack in October of 2015, and it's really hard for me to say, but we filed bankruptcy. And I chose to do that because it was either my marriage or the business as it was presented to me. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, without a doubt, my marriage is more important.
Right.
So we did that. It did alleviate the financial burden of trying to get through all of that. But there's the judgment. I was afraid to go to the grocery store. Like, oh, everybody knows I'm wearing like a big letter, like the letter A on my chest, mm-hmm. Big letter B. Nobody knew and nobody cared. Yeah. But it was a deep, dark time in my life. And Jack said, when I said, I'm afraid to call my investors and tell them what happened. I have to go through a deposition at the bank and I don't know what I'm going to say. And Jack was intimately involved in the business at that time. And he said, it's not about asking your investors for forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself and be honest. Wow. That it's not everybody else that made this happen. It's you. And wow, like even to this day, here I'm years out. I want to save everybody from going through what I did and be aware. I think that the marriage piece of it is not just because of the business. I think that it was, if I'm going to stay above the line, what a courageous move for him to find a life that he was comfortable in. We'll leave it at that. I
You are
tried.
one classy person, because I don't know how to have the class.
Well, I am very grateful for the freedom that I also feel to be happier. And we weren't necessarily a great match. I do love him. I I wish him no harm. But I am in a great spot and a wonderful person in my life. And that wouldn't have happened without all the hardship. And I wouldn't be able to be here today having this conversation with you if I hadn't been inspired by all the hell that I went through to get here.
Yep.
And mental health is a huge thing. And entrepreneurs feel that weight at the end of the day. They feel responsible. And this will segue to something you and I talked about personal responsibility in the employees. You can only take it so far as an entrepreneur. You can only take it to the point of defining the roles in the business and where the business wants to go. Care about your people, bring them along for the ride. You're not going to do it alone, but you have to have the right people, and they have to understand the why. And that's how, if I had had a better decision-making model of who to hire, when to fire, what the systems were, because you can't scale nothing. It's like 0 times 0 is 0.
Right.
Can't scale nothing. If you don't have anything that's solid, you can't scale and grow. And I tried to do that, and I got to a good point, and then it crumbled. And I guess I'll leave it at that there's still hope. And I think the Great Game is an incredible tool if you can be honest with yourself.
Well, that's the basis of it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Rochelle, that's the basis of all of what we're talking about is honesty. And it is so hard to control our own stories. Right. I mean, I'm a really creative person. I am really creative. And so I'm the idea guy, and all that sort of thing. Well, the problem is that's also a curse, because it's like, oh, let's dream a dream and let's, but being honest with myself and saying, here are my gaps, as you said, whether it's financial acumen or, one of the things that gets me is Jack always says, I want people not to work here at an SRC company because they need a paycheck. I want them to see the bigger picture. Well, no one comes to you at an entry-level job going, let me see your financials. I want to see if this is a healthy place, or if it's, they're like, I need a job. Give me and I know things are different now. If we all go back a few months pre-COVID, we were all scrambling around trying to find talent. Then COVID, and after COVID, we'll all be scrambling again. I mean, when you zoom out enough, you talked about being visionary, if you can zoom out enough and be objective and go, oh yeah, we still have a people problem. There's just a whole lot of artificial and natural stuff, happening right now that just muck up the works. Well, if we could each zoom out of ourselves a little bit and say, what is it really? When you tell your story, I'm going, wow, at 27, you're doing all this. And at 27, I don't know if I could tie my shoes. It's like, you were amazing. You are amazing. But in between, you let judgment, your own internal judgment, really mess up your works, right? So that's artificial. That's self-flagellation, if you will. And now you're able to zoom out and go, oh, okay, so these are the things I won't do again. And that's what, when we talk about, taking care of our people, that accountability that you talked about goes both ways, right? We want our people to hold us accountable. So, we are making sure we do what we said we were going to do. But at the same time, if someone's going to work for us, and this was a hard lesson for me to learn, because I'm just a nice guy and I really like people. But the thing is, you can take care of people to the point where the wrong people move up in your company.
Yeah.
Then you got a problem, because right seats, right bus, even that gets hidden over by, first of all, sometimes times are just good, and great revenue means a lot of things are covered over, like cheap spackle, and then when things get tough and it cracks away, you're going, how did I get here? a lot of people, you need to know one thing, and I think a lot of your audience is going to be the same way. I spend a lot of time with the Inc. 5000 group. You know, they ask me to come out and speak at the conferences and that sort of thing. And you hang out with them long enough, most entrepreneurs are exactly like you, Rochelle. They got a great idea. They're driven. They have their true north, right? They know what they want to do. Maybe it's, business, family, physical health, faith, whatever, stack them up. Very, very similar. I'm not saying they're the same. It's just similar, right? People that are driven and have purpose, and they want to make something amazing. The interesting thing, the common thing is that very few people that I have met in that community are comfortable. When in a closed room, you ask, are you comfortable with the financials yourself? And they're like, well, no, I have numbers people for that. And the thing is, as soon as we delegate that responsibility, I'm not saying everyone needs to be an accountant, but what Jack learned is that, man, if you don't understand it, you need to learn. You need to ask the questions, because a lot of times we don't want to admit that we're not financially astute. And what happens is we sweep that over here. We have someone else handle it. And that's sort of when things get out of, I don't want to say control, but off our radar. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I think personal financial acumen is really that way. It's the number one cause of marital stress. It's the number one cause of family issues, they say. And I'm going, how can we all know this? And yet we all buy into this thing. May I tell you a story about, So my daughter called me up last night. She's moving from Chicago to Vermont to get her master's. And she called up and she said, what's my credit score? And I said, I don't know. Do you know? And we had a whole conversation around, first of all, she was asking the question because it was on an application to rent a place, apparently. And I had to walk her through the idea of what is a credit score, why is it important, all this. And this is what she said to me. She was like, why do I have to even do this? And I said to her, money flows from people who don't understand it to people who do. So like it or not, you better learn it. I had to, by the way, she's getting her master's in art, which I forbade all my children to study art, and 2 of them already are in the business. So, but the cool thing is they're the smartest people about money that I know, and they will continue to help them. The whole thing comes down to, you think you've been teaching your kids about something all these years, and then, early 20s, she comes in and asks a question that should be one of the most basic. Oh, I did a terrible job. No. So now flash this into your business. Any person that comes into your business, I guarantee you, will probably not be very comfortable with the financials, because they never had to be, nor did society want them to be, because that's not the way society works, right? The biggest marketing machine in the world is credit. It's the way it is. And so if we're going to close the gap between the haves and have-nots, we need to look at that root cause, which is people don't understand money. So we can throw it right now. We've got all these things going on, artificial stimuli. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's a delay mechanism, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have a financial issue to deal with. That's, talk about unprecedented. And I'm not being political. I hope you know that. What I'm saying is just look at it. So right now, we literally have 80 job openings at SRC. At the same time, we have people, we've been hearing stories all around the country of people saying, I can't, especially restaurants, I can't get people to come back because they're making more money. Well, until this weekend, right? And, when the stimuli run out, whoa, shoot, what's going to happen then? Then we've got the mental health thing. As you said, I think mental health is the huge thing that's ignored. And it's also got a lot of stigma around it. So if you start to add these things up, the human component of this whole thing includes a financial and a physical and a mental, and all of those things that we think about as leaders. We need to understand that all of our people are going through those. So when someone comes in, you got to go right underneath that veneer of, hey, I show up on time and I'd be a great employee and I have technical skills unmatched by any, right? You're going, great, I love your veneer. We need to strip it back a little bit and say, what is it that we can help you develop on? And I know that's a lot. It's not for everybody. I guarantee you, open book management, great game of business is not for everyone. But for those in your audience who are saying, I do believe in people. I think that is truly the big asset in the business. It ain't easy. We know that. People are complex and complicated, but given a chance, people will want to learn about the business. Given the opportunity, and the education, they will make a difference in the business. And given the respect, they will do positive things, not only in the business, but in their community, right? If we say, hey, I respect, and that's what Jack Stack has done for me. It's like, who would hire an art major at an engine company? No one, but they weren't looking at that. They weren't looking at the certificate or the degree, or even the technical skills. It was about, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to commit? Are you ready to go? And not everybody makes it. Mm-hmm. In fact, if I'm being totally honest here, I called up a previous employer who I really liked, and we always, to this day, we have a great relationship. And I said, hey, Jan, I thinking about going to work for Jack Stack over here at SRC. And I really didn't know much about it. In fact, I wasn't really thrilled. I was looking for the stability of a paycheck, and I knew that they were like this super company, that they took care of their people and all. And I was very much a child waiting for a parent to take care of me. Jan goes, yeah, it's a performance environment, Steve. I don't know if you're going to like it. I'm like, what? And I look back on that and I go, but that is it. It's not that I didn't work hard or anything else, but accountability, when you do it right, I mean, it's a tough environment. And I don't mean like it's so hard you can't do it. It challenges you. And so the last time I can remember looking across the table at Stack and having him look at me like he's ready to throttle me by the neck. He said, so what do you think, Baker? You've been here a while. And I'm I hope you don't mind, I'm emulating his, tough Chicago voice there. And I go, well, I can only tell you one thing. And that is that you have successfully kept me out of my comfort zone for 14 years. And he looked at me like, what? But then he processed it, right? And I'm saying, no, it's a good thing, because that's how you grow. You talked about the fact that you have to, I don't remember the words you used, but you have to stretch and you have to hurt a little bit and you have to, well, that's like a workout. You don't get physical results until you overstress the muscle, right? The bone, that sort of thing. That's how you get growth, is a little bit of damage and a lot of growth, a little bit of damage. Like, well, in a healthy way, that would be exercise. And in business, a healthy way would be to say, let's try something different. Let's expand, let's grow. Because in this world, we don't get a choice. You have to grow. And I mean that financially. And I mean that physically and health-wise, right? I mean, if we don't grow, we atrophy. And that's a big problem we have in this country, is we just, it's pretty easy life. And the more entitlements that we get, the more control we give away to someone else. I hope that didn't sound too George Orwell.
No, I think it's very true. And, it comes down to, other things that Jack talks about and he brings it up in all of his books. But again, in this one, Change the Game, he brings up, why aren't you spending more time with your kids? Why aren't you at the baseball games? You really want to work yourself to death? Because here's the thing, you're going to leave your business. And Bo Burlingham, I think, says this in his book, which is he's the founder of Small Giants, which is how I met Jack. You're going to leave your business by either going 6 feet under or retiring. And You better have a plan in place for both. And frankly, it all comes down to the numbers, right? And your business, and people don't talk about this, but Sir Stephen Wilkinson, another Small Giants and another Small Giant friend and mentor to me, almost like my big brother, he's like, this is your greatest asset. This is your investment, your greatest physical asset, the intellectual property, you've got to really focus on this and treat it like you are an investor.
Yep.
And I had never thought about that, because I loved what I did and I was driven by the passion and helping my clients and, helping employees. And I really felt good about where we were going, but I just kept taking, capital to grow and not making sure that it was actually profitable. So could we pay the bills? Yes, up until a certain point we could, and we grew and we bought more desks and computers and we kept going and we kept saying yes, when in fact we should have said, actually not right now.
Yeah, not now, exactly.
It's not never, just not right now. So I literally started a folder that is the not never, not right now folder. And I put my ideas in there because they're not bad ideas, but you've got to have some self-discipline to stretch yourself, like you said, to innovate all day long, but have a plan of
Yeah.
how you're going to execute that, which I
So,
think, oh, go ahead.
well, you just hit on something that's really huge, and I think a lot of people miss it, is the word discipline. So the real secret of the great game of business, open book, you name it, even, we talked about health, mental health, all these different things. The secret is discipline, and that's one thing we sorely lack. So one thing I've noticed about leaders is they typically are people that have learned self-discipline or forced themselves to take that on as a mantle. What we often do is we're instilling discipline in the organization with our weekly huddles, forecasting, succession planning, contingency planning. In other words, I can tell you, and Rochelle, I don't know, working with Jack as long as you may have run into this before, but twice a year, we do what we call high involvement planning, sales and marketing meetings, that sort of thing, where we're involving as many people as we can into this, what I would call, coming from the outside world, of course, I would call it like a VC meeting, like you're going into pitch. So I in my role as VP, I have to pitch the rest of the SRC organization on why they should invest in me twice a year. It is a huge pain in the ass to prepare for. You're always looking at the competition, the marketplace, the economy. You're looking at stuff that no one ever asked me to look at other than to fill out an SBA loan form so they could get more money, that sort of thing. But it's the discipline of knowing it's coming that you do it over and over again. You become a better business person. The other thing is other people learn more about your business. Your employees are buying in more because they understand more about how the world works, right? And how we fit into the world. But what's amazing is that I can bitch and moan about it for weeks and weeks, but man, when it's done, I'm like going, I know exactly what we're doing. And it's not that I didn't before, but it's like, it at such a deeper level because of the discipline of coming in and saying, if I know it well enough to explain to a bank or to a VC or to my own employees, I might just be able to make this thing last longer. And because there are templates around that, and those are in our book, Get in the Game. So this is our how-to book, Get in the Game. Because Jack never meant the great game of business to be a how-to. He wrote it, 20 some years ago, and just said, it's just our story. That's all it is. Well, these templates allow us to have that discipline and to encourage other people to learn about it. Why should I ask a supervisor to have 2 people on his succession plan or her succession plan? Because if they aren't working themselves out of a job, we aren't growing. Where am I going to get all the talent? Am I going to get it from outside? Good luck with that one. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think discipline is the real secret that people need to think about, is how are you applying discipline in all aspects of your life? We talked about faith in an earlier conversation, and the idea of if you didn't, whatever your spiritual approach is, if you didn't meditate every day or have a daily prayer, my folks still say a daily rosary, they're good Catholics, and that's meditation, right? It is connecting and refocusing and all of that. That's a discipline, right? It's a choice. And so what happens is people get out of the discipline. They stop watching the cash, or they get used to the easy money, or they just go, oh, just another couple of weeks. I'll give them another chance, instead of removing that person that might be a bottleneck to the organization or holding you hostage. The discipline is to face the brutal facts, as Jim Collins says, to really look at the situation objectively, and using the numbers allows us to take a combination of discipline and the objectiveness of numbers, put them together and say, here is what the world is saying. This is what the economy is saying. This is what, I'm telling you, it is something I've learned here and nowhere else. The simplicity is that if you really do believe you're on the right path, go get the data. Deming said that, right? In God we trust, everyone else bring data. Holy crap. Why didn't I learn this stuff in art school? Come on.
I know. I love Deming. And, by the way, my bachelor's was in psychology. I was a bio minor, and I'm a graphic artist. I
love it
as well.
Kindred spirits.
Yeah. I went through quite the journey to figure out who I am. But I'm glad you brought that up, because you showed the Get in the Game, which is next on my list. I'm so excited to read this. But that is the how-to. So you previously talked about there's the background of why great game is important, and then it's changed the game, and then get in the game. So what did you call this? This is the why.
Yeah, so if you look at those books, so you've got The Great Game, which started the whole movement. This is the what it is, where it came from, the origin story, and then so that's the what. Changed the game. Jack took all these stories he was hearing, from people who would, just like you, who would come and say, "Hey, what is?" That's the why. It's all, and it's education, government, technology, healthcare, every imaginable industry you can imagine, a story in that book. And then the how is get in the game. So you got the what, why, and how. You also held up one called Stake in the Outcome, which is Jack's book from 2002, about employee ownership. And to the average person, it is terrifying because there's a lot more to employee ownership than you might think. It's not just slap it on your wall and everybody's going to be engaged. He's talking about the realities of, and I think it's a good punctuation mark to what we're talking about, is that you can't just give people equity and think they're going to care. It is a huge undertaking, and the responsibility to teach them ownership really becomes brought to focus in this book, because it's like, wait a minute. He has one story in there about a guy. He goes, so Jack, when are we going to have the money for me to retire? Because I don't want to eat a crankshaft when I retire. And so Jack realized that, well, we got to start creating new companies and growing and growing and growing, because you're like a shark now. You can't stop swimming. You got to keep breathing. And because nobody wants to have stock that stays the same. You want it to appreciate. Well, the more it appreciates, the more expensive it is to buy someone out, repurchase obligation. So the whole point of it is that there's a total of 4 books right now. And I will tell you, there's a couple more in the works for future years, because it's inspiring. As soon as you write one, people start coming to you again. They go, "Oh my God, you really inspired me," or "Tell me more about this." And we should have gone deeper on that. So the idea is the what, why, and how of open book management, plus that employee ownership book. I tell you, it's phenomenal. I didn't know I could end up where I am, where I could be working with the coolest people on the planet who are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the folks who create all the jobs. We create the wealth. We are the economy. It isn't the Fortune 500. I mean, if you really look statistically, it's all the small to mid-sized businesses that are creating all of this backbone to our world. And the other part is this is where people learn. Mm-hmm. If you really believe there's a gap between the have and have-nots, and I've never met anyone who doesn't believe it, the only way to close it is to make the gap smaller, and the gap is caused by financial dissonance, right? I just said that for the first time ever, so it's trademark Steve Baker 2020. But it's the difference. And when I say dissonance, it's much like cognitive dissonance. We're out of whack here. The idea is simply that, man, my dad was an entrepreneur and a businessman all his life. He was in heavy equipment, but I'm an artist who wants to go in heavy equipment. If I would have gone to work for him and then found this great game of business stuff, holy cow, the wealth that could have been generated, right? But we all have to go on our journey. And now what I'm trying to do is do what my folks did, which is say, we just want you to be happy. So go, follow your passion, but, keep your nose clean and get good grades and da-da-da-da-da. Well, I'm adding another component, and that is you will be financially responsible, not for anyone else, not for me, it's for you. And you're going to hear all the stories I can tell you, and, we'll see how they do. But it is very interesting to see how often good entrepreneurs are treating their people in their business like children, because they equate it. I'm going to take care of you. If I take care of you guys, you'll take care of the company. You hear that sort of thing a lot. Mm-hmm. But go one step deeper and say, what if we're just teachers, not parents? Mm-hmm. What if we are the new teachers? Mm-hmm. That's how the gap gets smaller, because when we get smarter, the gap gets smaller.
Right. And you cannot have freedom to live your life if you do not let go. And you can't let go if you haven't coached appropriately. So you're going to win it together, not going to win it alone. And I do thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is the biggest thing. The people watching this are the people you and I both try to attract into our world, both for our businesses and for our personal circles. They are the people who care about people. They may not quite know how to elevate themselves and get out of the business, but that's the whole point. You don't want to, maybe you want to work till the end of your days. That's fine. No judgment there. But for me personally, I want to be able to share my talents and enjoy my, bring my passions through the needs of my clients and try to be of service. And those are the kinds of people that I'm hoping will watch this and learn from this and never give up your dreams, never give up the vision that you have, but find the tools to get you there and be coachable
Yeah.
and recognize your weaknesses. And by God, if you are not honest with yourself that you need help, and open up honestly. And that's the toughest part, I think,
Yeah.
is to say, I don't know.
To be vulnerable is a huge, huge deal.
It is. And I've learned it and I'm still learning. But that's why I do this, because I know I've failed. I know I hit rock bottom. I don't want other people to do that. I don't want them to hurt like I hurt. And that's the personal side of this,
Yeah.
that entrepreneurs are people too.
Yeah. They, strangely, they are.
I know, who would have thought? So with that, I mean, what would you, we have to end, but I want you to be able to talk to people about where should they start? What's the best way to get involved other than reading the books? Like what else?
Well, of course, the books are available anywhere, and they're also available as audiobooks everywhere as well. My feeling would be, I think you would start by maybe, reach out. You can go to greatgame.com/Steve if you want a little sample of the book or something like that. But also have wherever you are, there's probably an open book practitioner near you or in your business, your industry. Why talk to us? Talk to somebody that's a peer first, right? And go out there and find out what they think. And they'll have a different perspective, but they'll still have the core, right? And say, well, the reason that I was attracted to it is this. And the key is that we often fall prey to, and I do this too, because it's that continuous improvement worm or whatever I got in my head, that's what's the next thing? And entrepreneurs have such, business ADD. Is like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I will tell you, always be searching, always be looking. We're constantly looking and trying to improve, right? Constantly improving because of the community. But find someone to talk to first, find out their story. And then when you hear it from them, we're ready. Man, I'm telling you, we have got 37 years of content, a robust community, everything you could ever need to get started. I just encourage you to go out and learn more about it, because it's one of those things that isn't for everyone by any means. It will never be. Jack's book was a bestseller. And to this day, Random House still tells me, they go, business books don't do this. They don't just keep chugging along like this, but it's totally under the celebrity radar, right? Jack doesn't want to be a celebrity. He's on a mission. He's trying to build a business while he's trying to build a community. What I'm telling you is, talk to some people. You'll probably find your tribe. And if they're watching this, if you're, hey, people, I'm talking to you, just go find somebody else. We might just be the place you belong. And my encouragement would be is then we all, even though the methodology is very crisp and clean and outlined, we say adapt versus adopt. Find the way that it works in your culture and your business.
Yeah, thank you. And it is a movement. I really hope that it spreads like wildfire, continues to, because here's a great example of someone who had an idea to fix something. And now thousands, tens of thousands of businesses are following suit. And it's just an amazing movement. So thank you, Steve. I'm so grateful for your time today. I will make sure to list all the resources and share this with the world.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, Rochelle.
Thank you.